My husband's a cop. He'll beat you up. My neighbor screamed, then dumped lemonade on my 8-year-old over a $2 cup, so I did something that made her spiral for days. Hey Reddit, my neighbor said her husband would make my life hell. All I did was let her make her own life hell first, and document every second of it. I, 38 male, own a small plumbing operation in a suburb outside Portland, and my son Nolan is 8 years old with the energy of a border collie who just discovered espresso. Kid never stops moving, never stops asking questions, never stops calculating how every situation can somehow benefit him financially. I don't know where he gets it because I spent most of my 20s trying to figure out which end of a wrench was the business end. Second Saturday of June, Nolan walked into the kitchen and hit me with a business proposal. Use that exact word. He'd watched some kid on YouTube clear $100 in a weekend selling lemonade, and now he wanted in. He'd written the whole plan on notebook paper with a crayon that was running out of wax. Half the letters were just dents in the paper. $2 a cup at the end of our driveway. Profits going toward new Beyblades because the ones he had were mid. His word. I said yes. Obviously. What kind of dad says no to that? His profit margins assumed zero cost on lemons, which I was apparently expected to bankroll as an angel investor, but the enthusiasm was worth every cent. We spent Friday night building the stand, folding table from the garage, a piece of plywood I painted with leftover deck stain, and a cooler full of ice. Nolan's legendary lemonade in wobbly block letters across the front. He insisted on squeezing every lemon himself, which took 4 times longer than necessary, but the kid was committed. Saturday morning we set up at 8:30. Nolan wore a backwards cap and a shirt that said boss on it, a joke gift from his aunt that he'd adopted as a permanent lifestyle choice. He positioned himself behind the table like a general surveying the field, pricing on a sticky note taped to the cooler. $2. No negotiating. The kid had already decided he wasn't running a charity. He'd made a customer log in a composition notebook. Every sale got a timestamp and a tally mark, like he was running inventory for a warehouse instead of a card table with lemons on it. By noon, he'd sold 14 cups, and the neighborhood was treating him like a local celebrity. People stopped by just because the kid was radiating pure, uncut enthusiasm. He was making change out of a Ziploc bag of ones and quarters I'd provided as startup capital. A guy walking his dog told Nolan he should be on Yelp. Nolan didn't know what Yelp was, but said, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the exposure," which was something he'd memorized from a YouTube video about marketing and had been waiting for the exact right moment to deploy. That's also when the first correction happened. After his 14th sale, Nolan leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, loud enough for a passing couple to hear, $2 is honestly kind of cheap for what I'm offering. I leaned over from the porch. It's lemon juice and sugar, man. You didn't invent it. Yeah, but my version hits different. Your version is the same recipe everybody's grandma uses. Stay humble or I'm pulling the plug. He uncrossed his arms real fast. I'm humble. I'm very humble. Then quieter. But it does hit different though. 8 years old. Already needed ego management. But the kid was polite. He looked people in the eye. He made change correctly. And he said thank you every single time. Everything I'd spent years teaching him was showing up in real time. I sat on the porch and watched him work and felt something I don't have a word for. Pride doesn't quite cover it. Then Tanya showed up. Tanya lived 4 houses down, mid-40s, bleached hair that always looked one bad decision from snapping off entirely. Real estate agent, white Lexus SUV, vice president of the HOA, next door account with more posts than a town crier. She had opinions about everything. The length of your grass, the color of your mailbox, whether your existence was up to her standards. Her daughter Peyton was 9, quiet, a little awkward, always standing slightly behind her mom, like she was waiting for instructions. I always felt bad for Peyton, good kid stuck in the orbit of a woman who treated every social interaction like a campaign stop. Tanya walked up to Nolan's stand around 1 in the afternoon, Peyton trailing behind her. Peyton drank a cup, smiled, said it was good. Nolan beamed. Tanya said nothing, just watched Peyton finish, then turned and walked back toward her house without a word. Cold, but Tanya ran cold by default. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 hours later, she was back. Not browsing this time. On a mission. She came marching up the sidewalk like she was leading a battalion, Peyton half jogging behind her, looking confused. Nolan was counting his money, $38, losing his mind about it, and looked up with that wide-open kid face that hasn't learned to read danger yet. Your lemonade made my daughter sick, Tanya said. Not a question, not a concern, a declaration. Loud enough that the neighbors across the street looked up from their garden, and the couple walking their dog stopped moving. I was on the porch about 20 feet back, stood up and walked over. Didn't rush. What do you mean sick? Stomach cramps since she drank that. She pointed at the cooler like it was a biohazard. What did you put in it? Lemons, sugar, water. Same recipe since roughly forever. She didn't like that. She picked up one of Nolan's paper cups, sniffed it like a sommelier rejecting a wine, and dumped it slowly onto the sidewalk. Something in there isn't right. You can't just sell food to children without any kind of oversight. Nolan froze, looked at me. I gave him a small nod. Stay calm. I got this. Tanya, kids get stomach aches. It's 90 degrees. She probably had 3 popsicles before she got here. Tanya's face went tight. She reached for the pitcher, the half-full one sitting in the center of Nolan's table, grabbed the handle and started pulling it toward herself, and I could see exactly where this was going. She was going to dump it. On the stand. On Nolan's money. On the sign he'd painted. On my kid. I stepped forward, got my hand on the pitcher at the same time she did, and pulled it back toward me. She yanked harder. I held firm. And then she leaned forward across the table, practically lunging into Nolan's space, with her chest against the edge. And I did the only thing that made sense in that half second. I tilted the pitcher and let gravity do the rest. Over Tanya. All of it. Down her blouse, across her white capris, pooling in her sandals. 3 cups worth of lemonade, gravity-assisted, delivered with the precision of someone who works with pipe fittings for a living. The entire street went dead silent. Peyton's mouth was open. Nolan looked like he'd just watched a nature documentary come to life. The couple across the street were frozen mid-crouch over their garden bed. Tanya stood there dripping. Sticky. Sweet. Furious. You just poured that on me, she sputtered. You grabbed my kid's property and tried to destroy it, I said. I pulled it back. It spilled. Unfortunate. That is not what happened. Ring doorbell's been recording since 6 this morning. I pointed at the camera above the front door. We can let the footage sort it out. That landed. Her face cycled through about 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Rage, confusion, something close to fear. But she buried it fast. My husband is a police officer, she said, voice shaking. You have no idea what you just started. Tell him I said hi. She grabbed Peyton's arm and stormed off, lemonade dripping off her elbows the whole way home. Peyton looked back once with a face that said she already knew her mom had just lost something she couldn't get back. I looked at Nolan. He was staring at the empty pitcher with a mournful expression that had nothing to do with the confrontation and everything to do with inventory. Dad, that was like $4 worth of lemonade. I know, bud. Can we write that off as a business expense? 8 years old. Kid processes trauma through profit and loss statements. I downloaded the Ring footage that night and watched it twice. The grab for the pitcher, the lean across the table toward Nolan, the spill. On camera, it looked exactly like what it was. A grown woman trying to destroy a kid's stand and a dad pulling his property back. The lemonade going all over her was a consequence of physics. Nothing more. I backed the footage up 3 ways: laptop, cloud, and a USB drive I handed to my buddy Reggie the next morning. Is this about the lemon lady? He asked. Apparently, a neighbor's Facebook post had already made the rounds. I started a file. Yellow legal pad. Date, time, exact quotes, what everyone was wearing, angle of the Ring camera, everything. 12 years of running a business teaches you one thing above all else. Documentation isn't paranoia. It's preparation. 2 Saturdays later, Nolan wanted to run the stand again. Same setup, same recipe, same spot. I let him. Except now, 4 houses down, Peyton had a lemonade stand too. I am not making this up. Tanya had built Peyton a full Pinterest operation, matching tablecloth, Canva banner, mason jar dispensers, chalkboard sign listing flavors, strawberry, lavender, classic, priced at $1.50 a cup. She had undercut an 8-year-old by 50 cents. A 45-year-old real estate agent with a white Lexus and a graphic design subscription was engaging in a price war with a 3rd grader selling lemonade out of a Costco cooler. This was the timeline we were living in. But she didn't stop at competition. She weaponized the sick kid's story. Over that first week, Tanya launched a one-woman smear campaign, told parents at school pickup, posted on the neighborhood Facebook group without naming names, but with enough detail that everyone knew, even told the crossing guard. Nolan's lemonade had made Peyton violently ill, and it worked. That second Saturday, Nolan sold 9 cups. The following Saturday was worse. 6. Families walked past without stopping. Moms who'd bought cups 3 weeks ago crossed to the other side of the street. One dad came up, looked at the stand, said, "Oh, this is that one," and kept walking. Nolan heard him. He sat there updating his customer log with big gaps between entries, pretending it didn't bother him. Down the street, Tanya was personally waving people toward Peyton's stand, like a car dealership inflatable tube man in a Lily Pulitzer dress. Nolan looked at me with an expression that was way too world-weary for a 3rd grader. "That's not fair." It's not. But here's what I've learned about fair. It doesn't always show up on time. Sometimes it takes a while, but we're not going to sit here feeling sorry for ourselves. We're going to be better. We hit Costco that afternoon and came back loaded. Clear cups with dome lids and straws, fresh mint, frozen strawberries, extra lemons. We spent 3 hours developing what Nolan called the new menu. Classic over crushed ice. Strawberry mint, Nolan's invention, tasted like summer in a cup. And the nuclear option. Extra sour with double lemon and a pinch of salt that made your face involuntarily pucker. Nolan named it, taste tested it, approved it with a dead serious nod like a chef on a competition show. We raised the price to $2.50 and added a loyalty card. Buy 5, get 1 free. Printed on cardstock, hole punched by Nolan because he said it looked more official. He wasn't wrong. Then came the petty move. I sat down one night after Nolan went to bed and designed what I can only describe as the most professionally unnecessary document in the history of children's beverages. I called it the Nolan's Legendary Lemonade Official Compliance Sheet, laminated, mounted on cardboard, and zip-tied to the front of the stand. It listed seasonal vendor permit number. Once I got it, more on that in a second, full ingredient disclosure. Lemons, sugar, water, ice, that's it. Hand sanitizer station, present and operational. Last health department inspection result, no violations found. Customer satisfaction rating, 5.0 stars, based on 29 verified transactions. And at the very bottom, in small professional italics. This stand is not FDA approved. Neither is your aunt's potato salad, but nobody's filing complaints about that. I also pulled an actual seasonal vendor permit from the city. $45, basic application, approved in 3 business days. Completely unnecessary for a kid's lemonade stand, like putting a racing stripe on a tricycle. But now it was laminated and mounted right next to the compliance sheet. Nolan thought the compliance sheet was the greatest thing ever created. He started telling customers about it unprompted. "We're fully permitted and compliant," he'd say, pointing at the laminated cards like he was pitching investors. "Our competitor down the street is not." He'd lean in and whisper that last part. I had to pull him aside. "Hey, we don't trash talk a 9-year-old stand. Peyton's not the problem." "I didn't say Peyton, I said competitor." "Nolan, fine, but I'm still pointing at the compliance sheet." The kid was getting a little too comfortable with winning, but I let the compliance sheet stay because, and I cannot stress this enough, it was doing exactly what I designed it to do. It made Nolan's stand look like a certified operation, and it made Tanya's Pinterest setup look like exactly what it was, an ego project dressed up as a child's business. The next Saturday, Nolan's stand opened with a menu board, a tip jar, the compliance sheet, the laminated permit, and a cooler that looked like it belonged at a farmer's market. The sick kid rumor had started dying under the weight of zero evidence and the counter testimony of Peyton herself, who'd been overheard at school telling a friend, "I wasn't even sick. My mom just said that." Kids are terrible secret keepers. Nolan sold 31 cups. The following weekend, 42. The nuclear option was the top seller. Down the street, Peyton's stand had dried up. Tanya's approach was all presentation and zero soul. Peyton was running someone else's business plan. And once the pity angle stopped working, so did the traffic. Peyton had been spotted riding her bike looking relieved, which told you everything about whose dream that stand had actually been. The compliance sheet drove Tanya insane. I know because a neighbor told me Tanya had been photographing it and texting people about how smug it was. She called the HOA. She called the city clerk. She called the county health department. An inspector showed up, looked at Nolan squeezing lemons into a pitcher, looked at the hand sanitizer, looked at the laminated permit, and said, "This is the complaint?" He bought a nuclear option on his way out. Nolan charged full price. The following Monday, I got a formal email from the HOA requesting I cease all activity pending a review at the next board meeting. CC'd to the full board. Subject line: unpermitted commercial activity, resident complaint. 3 guesses who filed it. First 2 don't count. I called the city clerk's office the same day. The woman who answered actually laughed. She emailed me the city's official guidance on residential sales by minors, which basically said, kid stand is fine as long as it's not blocking sidewalks, selling cooked food, or turning into a weekend farmer's market. I forwarded that email to the full HOA board and politely asked if they'd like to send the same guidance to Tanya regarding her undocumented copycat setup, which had been running without so much as a sticky note of authorization. I'm a contractor. I deal with permit offices and compliance departments every week. Tanya had brought a passive-aggressive email to a regulatory warfare fight. The HOA dropped it in 48 hours. The president, retired guy who mostly just wanted to fish and watch Jeopardy in peace, sent me a private email. Between us, we know who filed that. Sorry for the hassle. Your boy makes a damn good lemonade, by the way. Tuesday evening. Knock at my door. Derek, Tanya's husband. County Sheriff's Department. Patrol Division. Civilian clothes. Jeans. Polo. Tired eyes. Dude looked like every year of that marriage had aged him double. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Nolan was in his room playing video games. I didn't want him hearing this. I'm Derek, Tanya's husband. I know who you are. He sighed. Not a threatening sigh at first. More rehearsed. Like he'd practiced this in the truck on the way over. Look, she gets heated sometimes. I think this whole situation got out of hand and it'd be best for everybody if we just let it settle down. You know how neighborhoods work. If we just what, Derek? His tone shifted. Subtle but deliberate. The way someone applies pressure and pretends they're not. I'm just saying. Permits get looked at. Complaints have a way of sticking around. Things get complicated when people push too hard on stuff like this. Nobody wants that. From somewhere behind him. Their house, 4 doors down. I could hear Tanya's voice carrying through the evening air. Muffled but unmistakable. She was on their front porch, phone to her ear, loud enough that Derek's jaw tightened when the sound hit. Something about, tell him what happens if he doesn't drop it. I let Derek's words hang in the air for a beat. Then I said, Derek, your wife tried to destroy my kid's stand on camera. She's been running a slander campaign against an 8-year-old. She threatened me with your badge. And I've documented every single piece of it. Footage, dates, exact quotes, everything. It's backed up in 3 places, one of which is not in this house. Derek's entire demeanor changed, like somebody hit a switch. The veiled pressure disappeared, and suddenly he was choosing every word like a man who just remembered his training on recorded statements. I never told her to say any of that, he said, carefully. That's between you and her. But the police report stays, the footage stays, and if she comes near my son again, I'm filing for a restraining order. He stood there for a long time, processing. Then quietly, what would it take to make this go away? It's not going away, Derek. It's going on the record. He nodded slowly, didn't argue, walked back to his truck and sat in the driver's seat for a good 30 seconds before starting the engine, just staring at his steering wheel like a man running through every decision that got him to this exact parking spot in life. Derek wasn't at the end of his rope. He'd been past the end for a while and was just free-falling. Not my problem. My problem was his wife. Nolan had cleared over $120 and was already talking about expanding into cookies and, his words, maybe a rewards app if you can figure out the technology, Dad. I told him to focus on operations before scaling. He said, that's what I'm doing. This is phase 2. I don't know where he learns these phrases. Tanya was still swinging. Next door thread. Unsanitary food vendors in our neighborhood? Should we be concerned? The retired firefighter down the street responded, Lady, it's a kid selling lemonade. Relax. 47 likes. Tanya's post got 2. 1 was her own account. Noise complaints. Fake vehicle reports. A burner account 1-star review on my business's Google page that said I'd flooded a kitchen and refused to pay for damages, which was interesting because I'd never worked at the address listed. All of it came back unfounded or got removed. Then she escalated to my livelihood. And that's when I stopped being patient. She called 3 of my clients, got their info from the lettering on my truck, and told them she was a concerned neighbor reporting safety violations at my company. One client panicked and put a hold on a $6,000 bathroom remodel. I spent half a day driving across town, sitting in their kitchen, showing them my license, my insurance, my bonding, and my inspection record. I said calmly, if you want this person's name, I'll give it to your attorney. They unfroze the job by end of day. But that was $360 in labor I ate because Tanya decided to weaponize gossip against my income. That crossed a line I don't let anyone cross. She wasn't messing with a lemonade stand anymore. She was messing with my mortgage. Then she crossed the other line. It was a Saturday in late July. Portland hit 94 degrees. Nolan's stand was packed. He'd sold 22 cups by early afternoon and was getting a little too comfortable with success. He'd started telling people the nuclear option was not for beginners, and that his operation was basically the only permitted stand on the street. Technically true, but delivered with the energy of a kid who needed to be humbled. A mom from the next block asked for a recommendation, and Nolan actually said, depends on your palate. I almost got up right there. Then he told a dad who asked if he could get a cup for $1.75 that, we don't do discounts. This is a premium product. I called him over. Nolan, you're selling lemonade out of a Costco cooler, not running a Michelin star restaurant. Be grateful people are coming. Be nice about it. I am nice. You just told a grown man your lemonade is premium. It is, though. Nolan. He looked at his shoes. Fine. I'll be more humble. He went back to the stand and offered the next customer a free sample with a smile. Good kid underneath the CEO energy. Just needed guardrails sometimes. I was on the porch about to correct him when Tanya came down the sidewalk. Alone this time. No Peyton. No pretense. She walked straight to Nolan's table and, without a word, picked up his tip jar, about $11 in it, and dumped the coins onto the ground. Nolan scrambled off his chair to pick them up. Then she grabbed a lemon from his supply bag and threw it. At my kid. It hit Nolan in the chest, not hard enough to injure him, hard enough to leave a wet mark on his shirt and shock him into silence. He stood there dripping, a lemon rolling at his feet, and for 2 full seconds, the entire block went quiet. I was already moving, got between them in 3 steps and looked at Tanya with the kind of calm that people mistake for composure, but is actually the last breath before something irreversible happens. You just assaulted my 8-year-old, I said. On camera. Again. It was a lemon, she said. It was a lemon you threw at a minor, and I have every second of it. Tanya's face flickered. She turned and walked away without a parting shot. Even she knew she'd gone somewhere she couldn't come back from. I knelt down next to Nolan. He was fighting tears, but holding it together because he's tougher than any 8-year-old should need to be. Money scattered in the grass. Lemon juice on his shirt. His sign still standing, but the kid behind it looked smaller than he had 5 minutes ago. Why does she keep doing that? He asked. Because some people are mad at the world and they take it out on whoever's closest. That's not your fault. Not even a little. We cleaned up. Went inside. I downloaded the new footage, watched the lemon hit his chest 3 times. Then I sat at the kitchen table and added everything to the file. Every incident, every recording, every quote, organized in the most devastating order I could manage. Nolan came into the kitchen while I was writing, changed shirt, watched me for a second. Are you going to get her in trouble? I'm going to make sure she can't do this to you or anyone else. He thought about it. Okay, can I have mac and cheese? That kid is unbreakable. I filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff's department, not against Derek specifically, about his wife repeatedly using his badge to intimidate people. I cited the voicemail Tanya had left me the previous month, 2 minutes starting with, "You think you're so clever," and ending with, "Derek is going to make your life a living hell." I cited the grocery store parking lot recording where she'd cornered me, called me a bad father, and said Derek had friends in the department who could make things difficult. I cited every incident where she'd invoked his badge as a threat. Every sentence factual, every claim documented, just the facts arranged to do maximum structural damage. That complaint landed on an internal affairs desk on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, Derek had been called in for a conversation with his supervisor. I know because Derek showed up at my door again. Same tired eyes, but this time he looked broken. Like wreckage he'd been trying to hold together for years, had finally given way under its own weight. I need you to understand, he said. I never threatened you. I never told her to say those things. I didn't know about the voicemails until the department played them for me. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. Derek's problem wasn't malice. It was cowardice. He'd spent years letting Tanya throw his badge around because it was easier than telling her to stop. He never explicitly threatened anyone. He just never told her she couldn't use his name as a weapon. And there's a word for that kind of silence. But she said them, I continued, multiple times, on record. And your department needs to know, because if she does it to someone else and there's no paper trail, that's on everyone who stayed quiet. Long pause. Then, she's going to lose it when she finds out about the review. Not my problem, Derek. I know. Another pause. I'm filing for separation. I didn't respond to that. Nothing to say. The man had been drowning for years. Tanya was the anchor. 2 weeks later, a moving truck in front of their house. Derek and Peyton loading boxes. Tanya nowhere in sight. Derek moved Peyton into an apartment closer to his station. Filed for divorce the same week. Tanya was alone in that house. And spiraling. 14-paragraph next-door rant about toxic masculinity in our community. So obviously about me that 6 people reported it. Taken down, reposted, taken down. Shorter version accusing the moderators of silencing women's voices. Also removed. She showed up at the September HOA meeting and tried to get my permit revoked. The president shut her down in front of the room. That permit was issued by the city. We have zero authority over it. You'd have more luck revoking his driver's license. 3 board members visibly trying not to laugh. Then she lost a listing. Big one. 4-bedroom in the nicest part of the neighborhood. The kind that makes a suburban agent's entire quarter. The sellers fired her after she showed up 20 minutes late and visibly agitated, then got into a phone argument in the driveway while the buyers were touring inside. Her managing broker gave her a formal written warning. One more incident and she'd be looking for a new brokerage. Everything she touched turned to ash, and every bit of it was self-inflicted. I just documented what she did, responded proportionally, and let her own behavior do the heavy lifting. October. Stand packed up for the season. Nolan made $312 over the summer, which he split between his Beyblade fund and a savings account I helped him open at the credit union. He told the teller he was reinvesting in next season. She almost cried. Then a letter from the county courthouse. Tanya had filed a small claim suit. $2,000. Emotional distress, property damage, and harassment. The woman who threw a lemon at my kid, left threatening voicemails, weaponized a badge, called my clients, and filed false complaints everywhere she could think of, was suing me for harassment. She showed up in a blazer and heels looking ready to list a colonial folder of printed emails and screenshots, most of which were her own Nextdoor posts, somehow reframed as evidence of my campaign against her. The judge listened to Tanya for about 6 minutes, feeling targeted, feeling unsafe. Nolan's stand described as a public nuisance, but she couldn't produce a single citation or health department finding. She tried to submit screenshots of the compliance sheet as evidence of my mocking and hostile behavior. The judge looked at the compliance sheet photo, read the potato salad line, and I swear I saw the corner of her mouth move. The only official document related to the stand was my permit, which actively undermined her case. My turn. Chronological. No emotion. No editorializing. Facts in order. The way I present project timelines to clients looking for reasons to dispute an invoice. Ring footage on a tablet. The judge watched the lemon hit my son's chest, watched it twice, played the voicemail, played the grocery store parking lot recording, presented every false complaint and its unfounded outcome, the fake Google review and its removal, the IA complaint that the sheriff's department found credible enough to act on. The judge looked at Tanya, at me, back at Tanya, with an expression I can only describe as the judicial equivalent of, "Are you serious right now? Ma'am, not only does your claim lack merit, but the evidence here shows a clear pattern of harassment, from you, not him, dismissed with prejudice. I'd strongly recommend consulting an attorney before filing anything else in this court, because the next judge may not be as patient as I am." Tanya's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Like somebody had unplugged her operating system mid-sentence. 2 weeks later. Neighborhood Fall Festival, bounce houses, food trucks, pumpkin patch, HOA tent where the president sat with candy corn and the facial expression of a man doing jury duty in his own neighborhood. Nolan and I were there. Derek and Peyton were there. Half the block was there. And Tanya showed up. She looked wrecked, not rough morning wrecked. Hasn't slept since the courtroom wrecked. Hair half done. Eyes bright in a way that means unstable. No blazer, no realtor armor. Just Tanya, raw and furious, walking like she'd been rehearsing a speech for days, and finally decided everybody needed to hear it. She spotted me near a hot cocoa vendor and came straight over like she was pulled by a magnet. Derek saw her coming. The HOA president saw her coming. Everybody saw her the way you see weather rolling across a flat highway. "You ruined my life," she said. Not yelling, almost worse. That low, shaking voice people use when they've been practicing in the mirror for 3 days straight. "You took my husband, my career. You turned this whole neighborhood against me. And for what? A lemonade stand? A stupid little lemonade stand?" I set my cup down. "Tanya, I didn't take anything. You threw a lemon at an 8-year-old and tried to outsource the consequences. I just kept receipts." She shoved me, both hands square in the chest. The retired firefighter, 10 feet away holding a funnel cake, said "whoa" out loud. Derek stepped forward. The HOA president stood up from his candy corn table. Derek didn't move toward me. He moved toward Peyton, pulled her behind him like he'd done it 100 times before. "Tanya, stop." She ignored him, which told you everything about their marriage in 2 seconds. Tanya grabbed the edge of the vendor's folding table and yanked. Sample cups hit the ground, cocoa splashing, kids jumping back. The vendor stepped away and said, "Someone call this in." An off-duty local PD officer was already moving in. Calm voice. "Ma'am, you need to leave, now. You're all in on it, all part of his little campaign. Last warning, walk to the parking lot or you're getting cited." Tanya picked the dumbest option available, stepped forward like she wanted to keep performing, and the officer took her by the elbow and guided her out. She ranted the whole way, loud enough for the festival to hear, about conspiracies and victimhood in a movie only she was watching. Disorderly conduct citation, trespass warning, in front of the HOA president, the retired firefighter, the mom she'd tried to recruit, and her own daughter. Derek didn't chase her, just stood holding Peyton's hand while she watched her mom get walked out like a problem everybody had been too polite to address until now. The following week, I filed the restraining order I'd been holding in reserve since the very first incident. Original footage, voicemail, parking lot recording, small claims dismissal, The shove at the festival with a dozen witnesses. The court granted a temporary order fast. Tanya could have contested it. She didn't. Either she knew she'd lose or she couldn't sit still long enough to survive a hearing. 500 feet from me, my son, and my property. Her managing broker terminated her that Monday. Between the lost listing, the written warning, and a public meltdown with a citation attached, there was nothing left to salvage. 2 weeks after the festival, a for sale sign went up in Tanya's front yard. Her former brokerage's sign, different agent's name on it. The lawn was longer than HOA regs allowed. The white Lexus was gone. The garage was mostly empty. I drove past it once, not to gloat, just to look. Then I kept driving. Nolan was in the back seat talking about how next summer he wanted to add cookies to the menu, maybe get a real cash register, possibly hire someone. I told him to pump the brakes on hiring until he could legally sign a W-2. He said, "What's a W-2?" I said, "Exactly." A few weeks later, I ran into Derek at the hardware store. Peyton was with him, holding a bag of light bulbs and looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. Not jumpy, not scanning for her mom's mood, just a kid holding light bulbs on a Saturday afternoon. Derek looked lighter too, like someone had removed a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten what standing up straight felt like. He walked over, hesitated for a second, like he wasn't sure if I'd talk to him. I gave him a nod. "How's the boy?" "Good. Planning world domination. 1 cup at a time." Derek almost smiled. Almost. "Peyton wants to do a lemonade stand next summer." I looked at Peyton. She looked at me. Shy, but steady. Not hiding behind her dad the way she used to hide behind her mom. "Tell you what," I said. "Nolan could use a partner. They can split a table." Peyton's face lit up. First time I'd ever seen that kid look genuinely excited about anything. Derek nodded. "I think she'd like that." We shook hands. Two dads in a hardware store figuring out how to make next summer better than the last one. I walked out into the parking lot. October air. Sharp. Leaves turning. The kind of afternoon where everything feels like it's resetting. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true. My brother tried to end himself because of women like me. I spent years laughing at men's loneliness. But when he nearly died alone, I did something I never thought I'd do. Hey Reddit! I didn't plan on posting, but the first time I understood how alone my brother really was, it was already a medical emergency. I, 29 female, HR compliance lead at a regional freight rail yard in central Ohio. 40-plus acres of steel, diesel fumes, and men hauling coupling rods in the kind of heat that makes your boots stick to asphalt. The workforce is about 90% male. Switchmen, track inspectors, brake operators, yard engineers. Guys who clock in before sunrise and go home smelling like creosote and regret. I loved that job more than I should have. Not because of the mission statement or the dental plan, because I had authority over every single one of them. Attendance flags, conduct violation, grievance paperwork that could tank a guy's seniority after 15 years on the rail. All mine. The guys didn't like me. I knew that. I liked that. And honestly, I enjoyed it more than I should admit. I once wrote up a switchman named Hal, 22 years on the rail, 4 kids, arthritic knees, because he sat on a crate during a 12-hour shift and his supervisor flagged it as unauthorized break. Hal came to my office, voice shaking, asked if I could talk to his crew lead. I told him the policy was the policy. He left looking like I'd taken something from him he couldn't name. Something twitched in my chest. I killed it quick. That's how you knew the system was working. My brother Colton worked at the same yard. Different crew, different shift. He was on the night maintenance gang, the team that inspects track joints, replaces ties, and handles emergency repairs between midnight and 6 a.m. when the main lines go quiet. It's brutal, low visibility work, the kind of shift nobody volunteers for. You just end up there because you were the last one hired or the first one nobody fought to keep. The pay was decent for entry level, about $21 an hour with a $2.50 night differential, but the hours chewed through people. Most guys lasted 8 months. Colton had been on nights for almost 2 years. He was 27, 2 years younger than me. Built like our dad, wiry, quiet, hands that looked 10 years older than his face. Hoodie permanently gray with rail dust. He used to be the funny one in the family, the kid who'd crack jokes at the dinner table until mom threatened to kick us both out. Somewhere between graduating high school and clocking his 400th graveyard shift, the jokes stopped. He still remembered my coffee order, though. Large, dark roast, 2 sugars, no cream. Sometimes he'd leave one outside my office door when his shift ended early. No note. Just the cup, still warm, sitting on the concrete like a habit I never asked him to start. One evening, he swung by my office before his shift started. Asked to borrow a power drill and some wall anchors. Said he needed to mount blackout curtains in his studio apartment because the morning sun kept wrecking his sleep schedule and his landlord wouldn't handle it. I told him sure. Tossed the drill case on the desk. He picked it up carefully, like it weighed more than it should. Then he mentioned Jolene. Not by name at first, just, this girl I've been seeing. Said she was coming over that weekend. Wanted the place to look decent. I caught something in his voice. Not excitement exactly. More like relief. Like someone had finally texted him back after years of nothing. I smirked. Told him, don't try too hard. She should like you for you. He gave me the half smile. Then he headed for the bus, boots squeaking down the hall, drill case tucked under his arm. At the door, he turned back. You eating dinner tonight? I waved him off. Yeah. Don't worry about me. Gone before I could even reopen my inbox. I didn't ask anything about the girl. Not her last name. Not how they met. Not whether she was good to him. Because honestly, I didn't think it mattered. He was a grown man. Men don't run out of options. That's what I told myself. A few weeks later, corporate dropped a men's wellness initiative in my inbox. My name listed as site coordinator. Mandatory presentation. 2 weeks out. I groaned loud enough for the hallway to hear. I'd built dozens of slide decks before. Stress management, work-life balance, feel-good quotes over stock photos. Management claps. Nothing changes. That was the formula. But men's wellness? I didn't even know what to Google, so I just started Googling. And I ran face first into a wall of data I was not ready for. Suicide rates among men. 4 times higher than women. Most of them under 40. Some younger than Colton. I thought about him in his dust-streaked hoodie with his cracked hands and his blank phone screen. But no, not him. He was just tired from nights. He was fine. I sat back, crossed my arms. Men are reckless, that's all. Even if some of them feel lonely. Isn't that on them? I floated the stat over burnt coffee with the admin girls the next morning. They snorted, called it male ego, called me a pick-me for pushing back. I forced a laugh and swallowed it. Started building the slide deck. Stock photos of beach meditation, bullet points about gratitude journals, appearance over substance. I knew how to play that game. That night, 10:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. Colton. First thing out of his mouth wasn't about himself. You doing okay? You sounded stressed last time we talked. I rolled my eyes even though he couldn't see it. Told him I was fine. Swamped with this wellness thing. He asked if I wanted to grab dinner that week. Said he'd found a spot that did a solid brisket plate, only 10 minutes from the yard gate. I told him I couldn't. Busy. Meeting the girls. Had leftovers anyway. Silence on the line. Then quietly, yeah. Just didn't want to sit at the counter by myself again. I told him he'd be fine. He said, yeah, night. Click. I stared at the phone for 2 seconds. My thumb hovered over the callback button. Plugged it in. Went to bed. I met her once, about 6 weeks after Colton first mentioned her. Family cookout at our mom's place. Jolene showed up in a sundress, bright smile, and helped mom carry the cooler without being asked. Asked real questions, remembered names. She even knew the yard ran freight, not passenger, which meant Colton had actually talked about his life with someone. Mom loved her immediately. I thought she might be good for him. What I didn't notice, or chose not to notice, was how Colton acted around her, quieter than usual. Let her finish his sentences. Laughed only after she laughed first. She told a story about him falling asleep at her place and snoring like a freight engine, and the whole table cracked up. Colton laughed too, but his eyes were somewhere else entirely. He sat holding a paper plate he hadn't touched, shrinking into himself in a way I'd never seen from him before. Over the next few months, things started to shift. Colton stopped calling me as often. When he did, Jolene was always audible in the background. A TV, a sharp comment, a door closing hard. He started canceling small plans. Couldn't do breakfast anymore. Couldn't help move that shelf. Jolene needs me for something, became his default answer, delivered flat and automatic, like he'd rehearsed it. I didn't think twice. He had a girlfriend now. Of course he was less available. Guy gets a woman's attention, he vanishes. Standard operating procedure. What I didn't see, because I wasn't looking, was that Jolene was draining him. Not constantly. That's what made her effective. She'd cook for him sometimes, text good morning before his shifts, gave just enough warmth that the cold always felt like his fault. But she didn't work, and she always needed money. Her car payment, a security deposit for a lease she never signed. Just Venmo me and I'll handle it. Colton handed it over, because he thought she was building something with him. Steady stream, zero accountability. He was pulling 60-hour weeks on the night crew just to cover it. He mentioned once that he was behind on his electric bill by 2 months. I told him he needed to budget better. Didn't ask why. She cut him off from everyone so slowly he didn't see it happening. Colton had one friend at the yard, A guy named Garrett on the track crew who'd swap shifts with him and grab a meal after work. Jolene told Colton that Garrett had said something disrespectful about her at a crew lunch. Complete fabrication, but Colton believed her because Jolene cried when she said it. He stopped answering Garrett's texts. Garrett told me later he figured Colton just got busy. Nobody pushed, nobody checked. One small lie, and a man's only friendship evaporates like it was nothing. Behind his back, she was telling anyone who'd listen, the landlord, mutual acquaintances, a woman at his apartment complex, that Colton was unstable, and she was afraid of him. None of it was true. She was planting seeds, making sure everyone already saw her as the victim, so that when things blew up, she'd have the story locked down before Colton ever opened his mouth. The worst part? Colton internalized all of it. He started apologizing for things that didn't need apologies, apologizing for being tired, for not texting back fast enough, for existing in the wrong tone of voice. He was being dismantled, and I was sitting in my office 3 buildings over, writing people up for clocking in 4 minutes late. One Thursday around 9 p.m., Colton texted me, "You free this weekend? I want to talk about something." I responded, "Slammed. Maybe next week?" He didn't reply. I didn't follow up. Presentation day. I stood in front of roughly 30 rail yard workers in reflective vests and steel-toed boots, all crammed into the break hall on folding chairs, projector humming. The room smelled like old coffee and diesel. Title slide, Men's Wellness Week. Subtitle, Healthy Habits, Healthy Mind. I opened with my practiced HR voice. Warm, confident, emotionally airtight. Stock photo of a man in a polo shirt meditating on a beach. Teeth white, posture perfect. Zero resemblance to anyone in the room. Mindfulness can reduce stress by up to 60%. Next time you feel overwhelmed, just pause. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply. A few guys shifted in their seats, eyes half closed from 12-hour shifts. Someone in the second row had his arms crossed so tight, he looked like he was holding himself together. Someone in the back muttered something I couldn't catch. A couple of heads bowed like they were hiding reactions they didn't want me to see. Then a hand went up. Third row. Older guy. Rough hands, creased face, voice like gravel in a bucket. "What if you go home and nobody would notice if you didn't come back?" The room went dead silent, not quiet. Dead. 30 guys staring at me like I was holding something they needed, and they were waiting to see if I'd actually hand it over. The projector fan was the loudest thing in the building. My throat locked. I had no slide for this. No bullet point. No cheerful stock image. This wasn't in the deck because I hadn't imagined anyone would say something that real in a room full of coworkers. I forced a professional smile. "Well, that's exactly why prevention matters, right?" Click to the next slide before he could respond. His eyes stayed on me. Not angry. Not hostile. Just hollow. Like he'd asked me for something real, and I gave him a pamphlet. I wrapped up with the closer I'd rehearsed. "Remember, balance is key. Your health is your strength. Strong minds build strong teams." No applause. The guys stood up slow, chairs scraping linoleum, boots dragging. They filed out like the room was underwater. Nobody said a word. My inbox lit up within the hour. Great kickoff. Excellent messaging. Strong engagement. Management was thrilled. I leaned back in my chair and told myself it went well. Something felt off, but the praise was loud enough to drown it. That afternoon, Colton texted, "Dinner tonight? Feels like forever since we ate together." He'd already texted me that Thursday, asking if I was free that weekend, saying he wanted to talk about something. This was his second try in the same week. I stared at it for a few seconds. Thought about saying yes. Thought about how easy it would be to just drive 10 minutes and sit across from my own brother for one meal. Then I thought about the girls' dinner I'd already committed to and the leftover pad thai in my fridge, and how tired I was from performing wellness for 30 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I replied, "Can't. Meeting the girls later. Got leftovers anyway." He typed, deleted, typed again. Then, "Yeah, it's just quiet here. Thought it'd be nice to sit with someone for once." One text. That's all it was. One text that I could have read as what it actually was. A man telling his sister he was alone and didn't want to be. Instead, I read it as inconvenience, as neediness, as something a grown man should handle without involving me. I sent back, "You'll be fine. Next time." Thumbs up emoji. That was it. Monday morning. Half asleep at my desk, eyes glazed on the attendance dashboard. One flag jumped out. Employee, Colton. 3 consecutive no-shows. Night maintenance supervisor had tried calling. No answer. Address check requested. My stomach dropped for a half second, but I brushed it off fast. Graveyard guys ghost shifts all the time. The hours eat people alive. I flagged it as pending follow-up and moved to the next file. Told myself it was nothing. Wednesday, the flag came back. Red this time. Supervisor note attached. Attempted contact multiple times. No response. Requesting in-person welfare check. I grabbed my jacket, muttered, "I'll handle it," to nobody. Drove over. Streets too quiet for mid-morning. His building looked the same. Paint peeling, blinds drawn tight, parking lot empty except for a dumpster and a stray cat sitting on the curb, like it was waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I knocked. Waited. Nothing. Knocked harder, the kind of knock that shakes the door frame. Silence. My phone was slick in my hand when I called the landlord. He showed up 10 minutes later with the building super trailing behind, keys jangling. Door opened. First thing I noticed, blackout curtains still sealed in their packaging. The drill I'd lent him sitting on the counter, unopened. He'd never hung them. Never even tried. Second, his phone on the kitchen table, face up. A dozen missed calls stacked on the lock screen. 3 from me, all from the past 48 hours, all professional welfare check calls. Not a single personal one. Third, the air. Heavy, still, unmoving. Like the apartment itself had stopped breathing days ago. Sink full of crusted dishes. Coffee cups lined up on the counter like a timeline nobody was supposed to read. Sandwich wrappers piled by the trash. Laundry basket half folded. Shirts stuffed in, but never put away. A list on the fridge in his messy handwriting. Electric/call dentist/try meetup/text sis. That last one circled twice. Pen marks pressed so hard they'd carved into the paper. A folded flyer on his desk. Community game night. $5 entry. Creases worn into it like he'd picked it up, pocketed it, maybe stood outside the door of whatever church basement it was held in, and then walked home alone. We moved toward the back room. I'm not going to describe what we found in detail. I won't do that to him, and I won't do it to you. What I'll say is that my brother was there, and he was barely alive, and it was clear he had been lying there for days. The landlord said something quiet. The super already had his phone out dialing 911. I couldn't cross the doorway. Just stood there, hands braced against the frame, watching his chest rise in shallow intervals, so faint I wasn't sure I was imagining it. On his phone, no lock, cracked screen, cheap Android he never bothered to secure. The search history was still open. How to make friends in your late 20s. Is it weird for men to eat alone? And one unsent text draft sitting in his messages app. You free for dinner? No recipient. Just a blinking cursor where a name should have been, waiting for me to give him someone to send it to. I didn't cry. Not there. My jaw locked so tight I thought my molars would crack. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. They took him to Grant Medical Center. I followed the ambulance doing 65 and a 40. At the ER, they wouldn't let me pass the double doors. 3 hours later, a doctor came out. Colton was alive, stabilized, but he was in a coma. Induced at first, then sustained because his body wasn't responding. ICU ventilator, feeding tube. The doctor said, guarded prognosis, and we'll know more in 72 hours. I just kept thinking about the drill on his counter and the curtain still sealed in plastic. When it hit me, really hit me, something locked into place behind my ribs. Then Jolene showed up, not to sit vigil, to perform. 2 days after Colton was admitted, she appeared at the ICU nursing station claiming she was his domestic partner and requesting access to his room and medical information. The charge nurse asked if she was on his HIPAA authorization. She wasn't. Emergency contact? That was me. No legal documentation, no partnership filing, nothing. Visitor access for non-family was restricted during ICU stays. Jolene filed a formal complaint, posted on social media that night about being kept from the man she loved by a vindictive family member. The landlord didn't stop her on a separate front. She showed up at Colton's apartment the same week, crying, and took his TV, his Bluetooth speaker, a jacket she claimed was hers, and, I discovered later, $1,400 in cash from an envelope in his dresser drawer. Over time, money he'd been saving for months. She knew it was there because she'd watched him put it there. The ICU waiting room became its own kind of static. Beige walls, folding chairs, coffee and paper cups nobody touched. I was there every day. But word got around the yard, and slowly, guys started showing up. Boots scuffed but cleaned just enough to show they'd tried. They sat stiff, hats in their laps, eyes on the floor. One by one, a few drifted up to me. His night crew supervisor said, "Never missed a shift. Always stayed late if we needed him." A neighbor from his building mumbled, "He fed my cat once when I was out of town." Polite kid. Garrett, the co-worker Jolene had chased away, stood near the vending machines the entire time and never said anything. Just kept looking at his hands. Every story was the same shape. Colton did the right thing. Colton showed up. Colton helped, but nobody actually knew him. Just a guy who showed up, did his job, went home, and nobody knew what happened after that. An older guy from the yard, gray hair, 30 years on the rail, lingered beside me near the ICU door, cleared his throat, and said something I'll never forget. Most men go their whole lives without anyone hugging them, unless it's their mother when they're small. Sometimes not even then. A man could go decades, and the last real hug he ever got was before he could tie his own shoes. Asked if that was really true. He shrugged. Depends on whether someone notices before it's too late. Then he patted my shoulder once, like punctuation, and walked away. The waiting room emptied slow. Men filing out, boots dragging, hands shoved in pockets. No speeches, no wailing, just silence thick enough to choke on. I stayed behind staring through the narrow window of Colton's ICU room. Tubes in his arms, monitors tracing lines that meant he was still here, but not really here. Jolene didn't come to the hospital again after being denied. She posted about it on social media instead. A black and white photo of her hand holding a candle. Caption: some pain doesn't have words. She had plenty of words when she wanted his stuff 2 days earlier, though. 2 weeks after the admission, I was back at my desk. Inbox stacked, coffee cold, a knock at the doorframe. One of the floor guys, same one I'd written up for attendance the month before. Hands jammed in his hoodie pockets, eyes on the carpet. He mumbled, "Just wanted to say thanks for that wellness thing you did." I blinked. His voice was barely above a whisper, like he was embarrassed to be saying it out loud. I sat up in my chair, gave him the professional smile. "Of course, that's what the program's for." He nodded too quick. "Yeah." Then he shuffled off, boots dragging, like he regretted opening his mouth the second the words left it. After he was gone, I leaned back and exhaled through my nose. That man had come to my door for something real, and I handed him a corporate tagline. Men really are starving for someone to notice them, and all I'd given anyone was Canva clip art and stock photos of salad. Funny how even scraps look like a meal when you haven't eaten in months. Later that same day, I passed 2 guys leaning against the vending machine in the hallway. Voices low, shoulders slumped like the machine was the only thing keeping them vertical. One of them said, "Wes missed again, 3rd time this month." The other shook his head. "Ever since his girl left, man just goes home to nothing. Empty apartment and a chair." They went quiet, like the words weighed too much to carry any further. I stirred my coffee louder than necessary, pretending I wasn't listening, but the words stuck to me like rail dust. Empty, hollow. I thought about how every call with Colton started with, "You good?" and how I always shot back, "I'm fine. Focus on yourself," like his concern was a chore I didn't have time for. The stat flickered in my head again. 4 times more likely. I swallowed it down, sipped the burnt coffee, and told myself it was just gossip. But something had shifted. The gossip didn't feel like gossip anymore. It felt like evidence. Guilt makes you stupid, or it makes you precise. I went with precise. I didn't go scorched earth immediately. 3 years in HR taught me that emotion without documentation is just noise, and noise gets thrown out the second it hits a courtroom. So I started building a file. The landlord gave me a signed statement about Jolene's visit, what she took, when she came, what she claimed. The lease was Colton's name only. No co-tenant, no second key ever issued. She had 0 legal right to be in that apartment. I petitioned for emergency conservatorship through the county probate court. 3 weeks to get approved. When I finally pulled Colton's bank statements, the pattern was immediate. Regular Venmo transfers to Jolene's account. Over 8 months. Just north of $6,200. Car payments she never made. Medical bills that didn't exist. A security deposit for a lease she never signed. Every dollar one directional. I printed all of it. I tracked down 3 people who'd witnessed Jolene's behavior firsthand. Garrett, a downstairs neighbor, a mutual acquaintance she'd told over coffee that Colton was mentally unstable. All 3 gave written statements. Garrett also mentioned that Jolene had once called the yard's front desk pretending to be an emergency contact and talked a temp receptionist into giving up Colton's pay rate. Data breach. I documented that too. During this time, Jolene was not sitting still. She caught wind that I was asking questions and launched her counteroffensive, posted vague things on social media about supporting Colton's recovery and being targeted by a family member who can't accept their own guilt, called people Colton had known and painted me as deranged, told a woman from our mom's church group that I was obsessed and dangerous. And then she called my mother, cried on the phone for 40 minutes, told mom she'd loved Colton more than anyone and that I was harassing her during the worst time of her life. Mom believed it. For nearly 3 weeks, my own mother wouldn't return my calls because Jolene had gotten to her first. That almost broke me. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage one night and just gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. I'd started doom-scrolling loneliness statistics at 2 a.m., like it was going to wake him up. My inbox at work was a mess. I'd snapped at a floor supervisor over a minor form error and had to apologize in front of his whole crew. I was unraveling, and the worst part was knowing that Jolene was counting on exactly that. She wanted me emotional. She wanted me to do something impulsive, something she could point to and say, "See? Unhinged, just like I told everyone." So I stopped, took a breath, opened the file, kept going. I filed small claims for the $1,400 cash and the stolen property. Jolene showed up in a black dress with a tissue, told the judge they'd been planning to move in together. Judge asked for documentation. She had none. I had the lease, the landlord's statement, and 8 months of bank records flowing one direction. She lost. Ordered to pay $2,100 total, the cash plus the value of the TV and speaker. She paid it in grudging installments over 7 months. The woman who drained $6,200 from a man working graveyard shifts suddenly couldn't find $2,100. Funny how that math works. But I wasn't done. While securing Colton's apartment, I'd found envelopes from the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services addressed to Jolene at his address. Subsidized phone program, utility assistance. She'd listed his apartment as her residential address on state benefit applications. She never lived there, never had a key. Different zip code entirely. I reported it to the state fraud hotline with the lease, her real address, and the benefit correspondence. Jolene tried to file a protection order against me during the investigation. Denied. She couldn't produce a single piece of evidence I'd ever contacted her directly. Everything I'd done went through a courtroom clerk, a public records office, or a notarized statement. She couldn't fight paper with performance. The fraud finding landed in month 5. $3,800 repayment order, benefit profile permanently flagged. Enhanced scrutiny on every future application she'd ever file. Not a felony, not handcuffs, but a permanent paper trail. I also turned the yard's data breach into a formal policy revision and incident report filed with the State Labor Board, Jolene's name on it. The kind of detail that makes a future employer's legal team real uncomfortable, real fast. The last face-to-face happened in a courthouse hallway, month 8. I was there for a compliance hearing related to the benefits fraud repayment schedule. Jolene was there because she'd tried to appeal the repayment amount and lost. I was sitting on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, file on my lap, when she came around the corner. She stopped. I watched her cycle through options in real time. Tears, anger, victimhood, indifference. She picked anger, walked up, voice low, vibrating. "You think you're better than me? You ignored him too." I didn't stand up. Didn't match her energy. "Yeah, I did. Difference is I'm not pretending I didn't." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "He loved me. He sent you $6,200 and you couldn't name his coffee order." She stood there for 5 seconds, then turned and walked down the hallway, heels clicking on tile. Didn't look back. I sat on that bench for another 20 minutes, not savoring anything. My hands were shaking, and I didn't trust my legs. Revenge is supposed to feel like a victory lap. This felt like filing the last piece of paperwork on a life that deserved so much more than paperwork. Month 9. Jolene's final small claims installment cleared. I got the confirmation call from the county clerk's office, printed the receipt, and added it to the file. The file was thick now, over an inch of paper held together with a binder clip. Every statement, every transaction log, every court date, every denied petition she'd filed against me. All of it clean. All of it on the record. All of it the kind of boring, bureaucratic damage that nobody writes articles about, but absolutely ruins your next 5 years. I know this because I watched it happen. A mutual acquaintance told me Jolene applied for a new apartment that same month. Nicer complex. Gated entry. The kind of place that runs a background and credit check before they even hand you the application. She filled out the paperwork, smiled at the leasing agent, probably rehearsed her little speech about fresh starts and putting the past behind her. Then they ran her name. Small claims judgment, active. State fraud repayment, active. Flagged benefit status, active. The leasing office didn't call her back. She called them, twice. Left a voicemail the second time. They never responded. She didn't find out with a phone call or a letter. She found out the same way Colton did, with silence. No explanation, no confrontation, just a door that used to open and doesn't anymore, and nobody on the other side willing to tell you why. Here's what a paper trail does when nobody's watching. The small claims judgment went on her court record. Public. Searchable. The first thing any landlord or employer sees. The fraud determination stacked a $3,800 repayment on top of it and flagged her benefit profile permanently. 2 monthly obligations she couldn't cover at the same time meant late fees, then collections, then a credit score that gets rental applications auto-denied and phone plans asking for a cosigner. And the Labor Board incident report? Not criminal, but it sits in a state filing system where any background check can find it. The victim act works until the system has receipts. Then it's just an act. She didn't get cuffs. She got a permanent paper trail. And paper doesn't forget, doesn't forgive, and doesn't care how hard you cry in a courtroom. Meanwhile, at the yard, I did something that honestly shocked me more than anyone. I went back to the wellness initiative. Not because corporate asked, because my brother was in a hospital bed, breathing through a machine, and I couldn't shake the image of that man in the third row, asking a real question and getting a stock photo of lettuce in response. I scrapped the entire slide deck, built a peer check-in program instead, voluntary, shift-based. No presentations, no vision boards, no meditation apps. Just a sign-up sheet where guys could pair up and agree to check on each other once a week. If someone missed 3 consecutive check-ins, a flag went to their crew lead, not HR. Someone who knew their name and their handshake. 18 guys signed up the first month. By month 3, it was 41. I didn't take credit publicly, didn't want it, didn't deserve it. Colton woke up in month 6. Not like in the movies where the eyes snap open and someone says the protagonist's name. A nurse called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said he'd shown purposeful movement. By Wednesday, he was tracking light. By Friday, he was blinking in response to yes or no questions. He couldn't speak for another 2 weeks. When he finally did, the first word was garbled. The second, 3 days later, was water. The third was my name. I was sitting next to his bed when he said it. I just leaned forward and said, "I'm here." Colton is in outpatient rehab now. Occupational therapy twice a week. Cognitive exercises that frustrate him because his brain knows what it wants to say, and his mouth takes an extra second to cooperate. He walks with a slight drag on his left side that the therapist says might improve over the next year. Might. He moved into a ground floor unit closer to Mom's house. I hung the blackout curtains myself, used the same drill. The wall anchors were still in the case. I drive past his old building sometimes. New tenant now. Someone put up different curtains in the window. The community game night flyer is gone from the board in the lobby, replaced by a dog walking co-op sign-up. Life moved on without asking anyone's permission. That's what life does. At work, I still run compliance, still process the flags and the write-ups and the grievance forms. But I read them differently now. Every attendance string that turns red, I pause. I look at the name behind the employee number. I think about what the form doesn't say. About the coffee cups lined up on a counter like a timeline. About the unsent texts and the game night flyers folded into pockets and never used. I don't talk about what happened at work. Not to the admin girls. Not to management. When people ask about Colton, I say the right things. That he's recovering. That he's tough. That I even ran the company's first men's wellness week while he was still working nights. Like that was some kind of proof that I'd done my part. I don't mention the missed dinners. I don't mention the calls I let go to voicemail. I don't mention, "You'll be fine." I just say I tried. And most days, I almost believe it. Last week I brought him a coffee. Large dark roast, 2 sugars, no cream. Set it on his rehab center side table, the same way he used to set one outside my office door. No note, just the cup, still warm. He looked at it, then at me. His face softened in a way I hadn't seen since before the graveyard shifts, and Jolene and all the silence I'd let pile up between us. He picked it up with his good hand, took a sip. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yeah," I said. "I know." We sat there for 10 minutes without talking. The rehab center hummed around us, wheelchairs, intercoms, someone's physical therapy session echoing down the hall. None of it mattered. He was there, and I was there, and neither of us had anywhere else to be. I still haven't told him about the file, about the small claims case, the fraud finding, the paper trail I built one notarized statement at a time while he was lying in a hospital bed, unable to blink on command. He doesn't need to know yet. Maybe ever. That's between me and a binder clip. But Jolene's credit report, her benefit eligibility, her clean record, those I fixed permanently. And the calls I didn't answer, the dinners I turned down, the "you'll be fine" I sent to a man who was anything but, that I'm fixing now. One coffee at a time, one Tuesday rehab visit at a time, one silence that doesn't feel empty anymore. It's not enough, but he's here, and I'm not waving him off anymore. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.